The skies above the United States, once bustling with a steady stream of commercial airliners ferrying millions of tourists to every corner of the country, are now marked by turbulence, and not just the kind that shakes a tray of drinks. In recent years, America's aviation industry has found itself grappling with a deepening crisis. A toxic combination of pilot shortages, shrinking regional routes, aging infrastructure, and skyrocketing costs has started to erode the backbone of domestic travel. Nowhere is the fallout more devastating than in the tourism-dependent economies of several states, where the absence of reliable air travel is causing visitor numbers to plummet. From the snow-capped peaks of Montana to the sun-drenched beaches of Hawaii, the aviation breakdown is triggering an alarming domino effect, crippling local businesses, hollowing out communities, and rewriting the map of America's tourism economy. Before we start, smash the like and subscribe buttons for more updates. Hawaii, once a glittering beacon for millions of international and mainland travelers, is suffering a silent collapse in its tourism lifeline. The problem isn't lack of interest. Hawaii remains a dream destination for many. But since the pandemic, several international carriers have reduced or eliminated routes to the islands, while domestic airlines have scaled back due to fuel costs and crew shortages. With fewer flights and inflated ticket prices, spontaneous trips to the Aloha State have become a luxury few can afford. Add to this the burden of new environmental regulations and attempts to control over tourism, and you have a tourism sector caught in a vicious cycle. Hotels that once had waiting lists now see empty rooms. Tour guides report fewer bookings. Even luau hosts and surf instructors are witnessing a sharp drop in customers. The economic ripple is spreading across the islands, and with so much of Hawaii's workforce reliant on tourism, the aviation crisis feels less like a passing storm and more like the new climate. Further north, Alaska is facing a similarly grim picture. Known for its breathtaking glaciers, wildlife, and the promise of untouched adventure, Alaska's tourism sector is highly dependent on summer traffic, much of it arriving by air. Yet a lack of regional connectivity has left many once popular destinations increasingly isolated. Airlines have pulled service from smaller airports, citing unprofitable routes and a shortage of pilots willing to take on remote postings. Tourists wanting to explore Denali, experience the Northern Lights, or cruise through the Inside Passage now find it more difficult, expensive, and time-consuming to get there. The logistical challenges are deterring would-be visitors, leading to cancellations and dwindling reservations. Meanwhile, communities that rely on seasonal income from tourism, already vulnerable due to Alaska's high cost of living and geographic isolation, are struggling to sustain themselves. Local operators from fishing charters to eco-lodges are reporting revenue drops that may force them to shut down permanently. Montana, too, is caught in the grip of an aviation-induced tourism downturn. In the pre-pandemic era, Bozeman and Kalispell saw sharp increases in flight traffic as tourists flooded in to visit Yellowstone and Glacier National Parks. But the pilot shortage, which has crippled the regional aviation industry across America, has hit Montana particularly hard. Flights have been cut back, delays are frequent, and airfare has soared. Some airlines have ceased service altogether to certain towns. With accessibility no longer a given, travelers are choosing more convenient destinations, even if they lack the natural grandeur that Montana offers. As a result, park visitation is down, hotel bookings have slowed, and the vibrant economies of gateway towns like West Yellowstone and Whitefish are losing steam. For a state that invested heavily in positioning itself as an outdoor tourism paradise, the inability to maintain reliable air service threatens to undo years of economic growth. In Louisiana, particularly in cities like New Orleans that thrive on a steady influx of tourists, the aviation crisis is colliding with other issues to produce a perfect storm. The city has seen a notable reduction in direct domestic and international flights. European carriers have downsized service, and fewer domestic routes are connecting New Orleans to the broader U.S. travel ecosystem. This comes at a time when the city is trying to rebound from pandemic losses and natural disasters. Fewer flights mean fewer tourists for Mardi Gras, jazz festivals, and cultural events that pump millions into the local economy. Businesses that depend on tourist foot traffic are struggling to make up the shortfall, while the hospitality industry is finding it difficult to retain staff due to uncertainty and fluctuating demand. The cultural vibrancy of New Orleans is legendary, but it can't survive in a vacuum. Without consistent and affordable air access, the city risks losing its standing as a premier destination in the American South. Even Florida, traditionally a tourism juggernaut, is not immune to the aviation collapse. While major hubs like Orlando and Miami still draw millions, the state's secondary and regional airports are seeing troubling signs. Smaller cities such as Pensacola, Sarasota, and Fort Myers have seen cutbacks in service, making them less accessible to the kinds of visitors who once preferred these quieter, more relaxed alternatives to Disney World and South Beach. Compounding the problem is Florida's growing struggle with extreme weather events, hurricanes, flooding, and heat waves, which have disrupted flight schedules and deterred bookings. For international travelers, the high cost of airfare and uncertainty about flight reliability make Florida less appealing than in years past. Even cruise tourism, long a pillar of Florida's travel economy, is being affected by fewer feeder flights connecting passengers to ports. In many communities along the Gulf and Atlantic coasts, the slow decline in tourist numbers is beginning to mirror the very erosion of the shorelines themselves, gradual but relentless. At the heart of this aviation meltdown is a deep structural issue that has long gone unaddressed. The United States is facing a profound shortage of pilots, mechanics, and air traffic controllers. Training and certifying new aviation professionals is a time-consuming, expensive process. Many pilots retired early during the pandemic, and airlines failed to adequately prepare for the rebound in travel demand. Meanwhile, regional carriers, which provide critical links between smaller cities and major hubs, have borne the brunt of the shortages. These smaller airlines often operate on thinner margins and are more susceptible to economic shocks. As they've reduced or eliminated routes, entire regions have become inaccessible or less attractive to tourists, who now opt for destinations with smoother travel logistics. The aviation crisis has also exposed the fragile underbelly of America's transportation infrastructure. Unlike countries with high-speed rail or robust public transit networks, the U.S. relies heavily on air travel to connect distant destinations. In sprawling states or remote locales, there simply aren't viable alternatives to flying. When air service falters, so too does the entire local economy, especially when that economy is built around attracting visitors. This is particularly true in rural and scenic states where tourism is seasonal and heavily reliant on convenient air access. Without it, restaurants, hotels, tour companies, and retail outlets all begin to suffer. The loss of tourism dollars doesn't just hurt business owners, it affects tax revenues, job availability, and even school funding in some towns. Some states have attempted to fight back. Montana has offered subsidies to airlines to maintain service. Alaska has lobbied for increased federal support for rural aviation. Hawaii is trying to pivot towards more sustainable and high-spending tourism that doesn't rely on mass air arrivals. But these are short-term patches on what is rapidly revealing itself to be a systemic failure. Airlines continue to prioritize profitable routes, often to already overserved metro areas, while ignoring the vast swaths of the country that need consistent service the most. As a result, tourism in these regions stagnates or declines, forcing towns and states to reconsider their economic futures. The impact isn't just financial, it's cultural and psychological as well. Many of the most iconic American travel experiences, watching the Northern Lights in Fairbanks, hiking through Glacier National Park, sipping a cocktail on a lanai in Maui, are becoming harder for average people to access. Airfare has become prohibitively expensive, even for domestic travel. Limited seat availability means travelers have to plan months in advance or risk being priced out. And for small businesses in tourism-heavy towns, the unpredictability of air travel makes it harder to plan seasons, hire staff, and market effectively. Technology and innovation might eventually provide some relief. There's growing interest in electric aircraft for short-haul regional routes, and some cities are experimenting with vertical takeoff and landing vehicles (VTOLs). But these are years away from commercial viability and do nothing to address the immediate crisis. In the meantime, communities are left to fend for themselves, trying to lure travelers with drive-to campaigns or partnerships with bus and rail lines that are often underwhelming or logistically difficult for tourists. The broader implication is that America is becoming a harder country to explore. For a nation that once prided itself on the freedom of the open road and the accessibility of its most awe-inspiring landscapes, this is a troubling evolution. Tourism isn't just about economic exchange, it's about cultural connection, national identity, and shared experience. When vast parts of the country become harder to reach, they also risk becoming forgotten. At its core, the aviation crisis is a reflection of deeper problems: underinvestment in infrastructure, short-term thinking in public and private sectors, and a failure to value regional and rural America in travel planning. The states seeing the steepest tourism declines, Hawaii, Alaska, Montana, Louisiana, and Florida, each offer unique natural and cultural experiences that define the American identity. Their struggles are not isolated incidents, but early warning signs of what may happen if the aviation industry continues its uneven recovery. Tourism, once a lifeline, is now becoming a liability in areas that can no longer depend on the planes that used to bring it in. If the aviation crisis continues to accelerate unchecked, America risks losing not just billions in tourism revenue, but something far more precious: the connection between its people and its places. The destinations that once seemed like part of every family's summer plans or retirement dreams are becoming harder to reach, more expensive to enjoy, and in some cases tragically out of reach altogether. The question now isn't just whether these states can survive the crisis, but whether the country can afford to let them fade. The aviation crisis is spreading far beyond the coasts and remote regions. It's also unraveling the tourism fabric of states that, until recently, thrived on domestic and international travel. As air routes vanish and flight reliability deteriorates, the once bustling gateways of Michigan, Wyoming, New Mexico, Maine, and South Dakota are witnessing a disquieting shift. These aren't fringe destinations. They are home to national treasures, historic landmarks, and vibrant seasonal economies. But as aviation declines, these states find themselves grappling with shrinking tourist seasons, abandoned hotel developments, and a growing sense that they've been quietly cut out of America's travel conversation. Michigan, with its sapphire Great Lakes and charming northern towns, once boasted a strong tourism economy driven in part by summer flights from major cities like Chicago, New York, and Atlanta. But today, as airlines prioritize mega hubs and profitable coast-to-coast routes, secondary airports across Michigan are being left behind. Traverse City, a booming tourist hub in pre-crisis years, now faces frequent flight cancellations, limited route availability, and unpredictable fares. Even Detroit Metro, the state's primary international airport, has seen cuts to its regional connections. The effect is stark. Michigan's famed summer tourism, centered around its lakeshores, wineries, and forest retreats, is seeing a sharp decline. The loss of short-haul flights means that weekend trips and spontaneous getaways are disappearing, replaced by longer drives or different destinations entirely. Local economies that depend on the summer influx, such as those in Petoskey, Holland, and Mackinac Island, are under pressure, with seasonal workers seeing shorter employment windows and small businesses missing revenue targets. Out west, Wyoming is facing a tourism squeeze unlike any in recent memory. With Yellowstone National Park drawing millions annually, the state relies heavily on air service to regional gateways like Jackson Hole and Cody. However, the aviation crisis has begun to undermine this critical infrastructure. Smaller airports are increasingly expensive to serve, and with pilot shortages and staffing problems at TSA checkpoints, flight reliability has plummeted. The result? A noticeable drop in park visitation and a reduced tourism footprint across the state. Tourists now find themselves rerouted to other national parks with easier access or skipping the hassle altogether. In towns like Jackson, hotel occupancy rates are slipping, and guides who depend on a consistent flow of high-season tourists are seeing gaps in bookings. The impact on the state's rural identity is profound. Wyoming's wilderness, long cherished as a bastion of untamed American beauty, is now becoming a less accessible dream. In the Southwest, New Mexico has always drawn a niche but passionate crowd of travelers seeking art, history, and nature. Santa Fe and Taos, with their distinct architectural style and deep cultural roots, should be experiencing a renaissance. But they're not. Flights into New Mexico's main airports, especially Albuquerque International Sunport, have been reduced or consolidated. Low-cost carriers have pulled out of less profitable routes, and international travelers, particularly those connecting from Latin America or Europe, now face convoluted, time-consuming connections to reach the state. This has put a strain on New Mexico's festival economy, which includes high-profile events like the Santa Fe Indian Market and the Albuquerque International Balloon Fiesta. Local artists and small business owners who depend heavily on tourist foot traffic are seeing their sales dry up. The absence of convenient air access has not only hurt tourism, it's severed a key cultural lifeline between New Mexico and the wider world, making one of America's most unique states feel increasingly insular. Maine, perched at the northeastern edge of the country, is another victim of aviation's slow collapse. Though Portland Jetport and Bangor International Airport remain functional, service to smaller airports that connect visitors to the state's scenic coastlines and national parks has been steadily eroding. In years past, tourists could easily hop flights into Bar Harbor or Rockland to explore Acadia National Park or Maine's signature lighthouses and lobster shacks. Now, flight cuts and route consolidations have made that travel path harder to navigate. The seasonal nature of Maine's tourism, heavily focused on the summer and fall, means that even small disruptions in air travel have outsized consequences. With limited rail options and long drives from Boston or New York, visitors are increasingly opting out. This trend is sending shockwaves through coastal towns where bed and breakfasts, boat tour operators, and seaside restaurants are witnessing shorter seasons and fewer guests. The aviation issue has effectively shortened Maine's tourism year, undermining the fragile balance many small businesses rely on to stay afloat through the long winters. South Dakota is perhaps the most quietly devastated of all. Home to Mount Rushmore, the Badlands, and historic towns like Deadwood, the state has always depended on summer road trippers and patriotic travelers flying in to check iconic landmarks off their lists. But regional airports, such as those in Rapid City and Sioux Falls, are now grappling with limited service, high ticket prices, and erratic flight schedules. In the past, tourists could build trips around reliable air connections that brought them within striking distance of the Black Hills or Custer State Park. Today, many are skipping the journey altogether. That's led to fewer group tours, emptier campgrounds, and a noticeable dip in attendance at summer events like the Sturgis Motorcycle Rally. This isn't just a matter of missed vacations. It's a structural problem for a state that built much of its seasonal economy around air accessibility. The drop in tourism dollars is already impacting local tax revenues and employment rates, with ripple effects reaching into areas like public services and community development. Each of these states tells a different version of the same story. When aviation fails, tourism falters. And when tourism falters, entire economies weaken. These aren't places that can easily pivot to other industries. Many of them are geographically isolated, seasonally dependent, and culturally defined by their ability to welcome outsiders. Without robust and affordable air connections, their unique offerings, whether it's the quiet beauty of a Michigan lake, the ancient adobe of a New Mexico plaza, or the drama of a Wyoming canyon, become inaccessible. That's a loss not just to the states themselves, but to the national narrative. These destinations hold pieces of America's soul, and the current aviation crisis is slowly cutting them off from the people who seek them. What's especially frustrating for tourism boards and local governments is the sense of helplessness. The decisions about routes, staffing, and investments are largely out of their control, governed instead by airline profit margins and FAA capacity. Even when local entities attempt incentives, waiving landing fees, offering subsidies, or investing in airport upgrades, there's no guarantee of long-term commitment from carriers. That instability makes it hard to build momentum or confidence, especially among tour operators and travel agencies who need months of lead time to sell packages and plan experiences. What remains is a growing disconnect between the promise of American tourism and the logistics of actually experiencing it. As air service retracts, the playing field tilts more steeply in favor of cities already flush with transportation options. Major metros get more flights, more marketing, and more traveler loyalty, while secondary and regional destinations are left to wither on the sidelines. This centralization of tourism further drains the vitality from the heartland and rural pockets, deepening economic divides and hollowing out the culture of exploration that once defined the American travel spirit. There's still time to reverse this trajectory, but it will require bold, coordinated investment, not just in aviation personnel, but in infrastructure, regional partnerships, and tourism strategy. States like Michigan, Wyoming, New Mexico, Maine, and South Dakota offer something money can't buy: authenticity, space, serenity, and a sense of history. But those qualities only matter if people can get there. The question no longer is whether these states are worth visiting. They are. The question is whether the country is willing to invest in making them reachable. Because without that, the tourism dream that these states represent, rugged independence, cultural depth, untamed nature, and small-town charm, will fade into nostalgia, remembered fondly, but no longer experienced. And that would be a tragedy not just for them, but for all of America. If you liked this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on which states will suffer most in this aviation crisis? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching and see you next time.